There's an urgent crisis that's happening right now, and it's very satisfying to provide this treatment because it's so effective, and you really get the feeling that you're changing people's lives. I have lived through addiction in my family, and I had a family member that died of a heroin overdose when I was growing up, and it feels natural to me to try to give back in that way. So I think for people that are addicted to opiates, the major thing is that there are biological treatments available. There are medicines available that are the gold standard of treatment now. If you want me to geek out, Suboxone or buprenorphine, which is the active ingredient in Suboxone, is what's called a partial agonist. It goes to that opiate receptor in the brain, and it activates it, but just to a small amount. Heroin is a little bit like going to that spot in your brain, and it treats it like a light switch. It's off and it turns it on. What buprenorphine does is it goes to the same spot, but instead of a light switch, it treats it a little bit like a dimmer switch. So it turns the lights on, but only about 40% of the way on. Invariably, a lot of times patients want to turn the page on their addiction. They want to be finished with all this treatment, and when am I ready to get off this medicine and kind of move on with my life as if everything is going to be fine and good. And what I often find myself saying is, well, you know, if you were a diabetic and you were coming into my office and you had perfect blood sugars, at what point do you think you would say, well, doc, you know, my sugars have been so good, when's it time for me to come off the insulin? You wouldn't ever, and people kind of chuckle and they say, well, you know, okay, that sort of makes sense. The reason why you're feeling good and the reason why you're staying stable, it's because of this medicine. And, you know, more and more we're looking at this kind of an illness as a chronic condition that we want to try to manage. And sure, one day you want to get off of your opiate replacement. I think that tends to be off in the future, though. For most people, we want to look at managing this over time, and really the healing and the change, they take a long time. We have to be very patient about that. Hope drives change. Guilt and shame and fear and embarrassment don't make people stop. They don't help people to get better. There's an urgent crisis that's happening right now, and it's very satisfying to provide this treatment because it's so effective, and you really get the feeling that you're changing people's lives. I have lived through addiction in my family, and I had a family member that died of a heroin overdose when I was growing up, and it feels natural to me to try to give back in that way. So I think for people that are addicted to opiates, the major thing is that there are biological treatments available. There are medicines available that are the gold standard of treatment now. If you want me to geek out, Suboxone or buprenorphine, which is the active ingredient in Suboxone, is what's called a partial agonist. It goes to that opiate receptor in the brain, and it activates it, but just to a small amount. Heroin is a little bit like going to that spot in your brain, and it treats it like a light switch. It's off and it turns it on. What buprenorphine does is it goes to the same spot, but instead of a light switch, it treats it a little bit like a dimmer switch. So it turns the lights on, but only about 40% of the way on. Invariably, a lot of times patients want to turn the page on their addiction. They want to be finished with all this treatment, and when am I ready to get off this medicine and kind of move on with my life as if everything is going to be fine and good. And what I often find myself saying is, well, you know, if you were a diabetic and you were coming into my office and you had perfect blood sugars, at what point do you think you would say, well, doc, you know, my sugars have been so good, when's it time for me to come off the insulin? You wouldn't ever, and people kind of chuckle and they say, well, you know, okay, that sort of makes sense. The reason why you're feeling good and the reason why you're staying stable, it's because of this medicine. And, you know, more and more we're looking at this kind of an illness as a chronic condition that we want to try to manage. And sure, one day you want to get off of your opiate replacement. I think that tends to be off in the future, though. For most people, we want to look at managing this over time, and really the healing and the change, they take a long time. We have to be very patient about that. Hope drives change. Guilt and shame and fear and embarrassment don't make people stop. They don't help people to get better. There's an urgent crisis that's happening right now, and it's very satisfying to provide this treatment because it's so effective, and you really get the feeling that you're changing people's lives. I have lived through addiction in my family, and I had a family member that died of a heroin overdose when I was growing up, and it feels natural to me to try to give back in that way. So I think for people that are addicted to opiates, the major thing is that there are biological treatments available. There are medicines available that are the gold standard of treatment now. If you want me to geek out, Suboxone or buprenorphine, which is the active ingredient in Suboxone, is what's called a partial agonist. It goes to that opiate receptor in the brain, and it activates it, but just to a small amount. Heroin is a little bit like going to that spot in your brain, and it treats it like a light switch. It's off and it turns it on. What buprenorphine does is it goes to the same spot, but instead of a light switch, it treats it a little bit like a dimmer switch. So it turns the lights on, but only about 40% of the way on. Invariably, a lot of times patients want to turn the page on their addiction. They want to be finished with all this treatment, and when am I ready to get off this medicine and kind of move on with my life as if everything is going to be fine and good. And what I often find myself saying is, well, you know, if you were a diabetic and you were coming into my office and you had perfect blood sugars, at what point do you think you would say, well, doc, you know, my sugars have been so good, when's it time for me to come off the insulin? You wouldn't ever, and people kind of chuckle and they say, well, you know, okay, that sort of makes sense. The reason why you're feeling good and the reason why you're staying stable, it's because of this medicine. And, you know, more and more we're looking at this kind of an illness as a chronic condition that we want to try to manage. And sure, one day you want to get off of your opiate replacement. I think that tends to be off in the future, though. For most people, we want to look at managing this over time, and really the healing and the change, they take a long time. We have to be very patient about that. Hope drives change. Guilt and shame and fear and embarrassment don't make people stop. They don't help people to get better.
Good evening. Welcome to a masterpiece of hope, a virtual celebration of healing. On behalf of Butler Hospital's leadership, staff, and patients, we would like to thank you for tuning in tonight and give special recognition to tonight's major event sponsors, including our presenting sponsor, Hinckley Allen, Cox Business, HBCS, New England Laborers Health and Safety Fund, and Purity Linen Services.
We are honored to have you with us, watching in support of Butler Hospital, a hospital that is vitally important to our community. Tonight, we're also honored to recognize Charles Rapucci and Catherine Cates-Wessel for their years of dedication to improving the health of those in need. COVID-19 is taking a serious toll on the patients we serve struggling with addiction, anxiety, isolation, financial worries, and an ongoing sense of uncertainty. All threaten people with a substance use disorder, as well as those at risk of developing one. Addiction can happen to anyone. It doesn't discriminate. In Rhode Island, addiction had reached an epidemic level before COVID-19. The pandemic has left countless people even more vulnerable to relapse and overdose. Thankfully, Butler Hospital is part of the solution, and so are you.
By giving tonight, you can change someone's tomorrow. Your donation will help to support addiction programs at Butler Hospital, including the inpatient, intensive outpatient, and telehealth programs. No matter how small, your gift will make a real impact on the lives of those who are choosing hope and fighting to heal. To make a gift throughout tonight's program, it's easy. Simply call 401-921-8526 to speak to one of our volunteers standing by. Send a text to 44321 and enter Masterpiece in the message box, or you can go right online to the URL that's on your screen right now.
And now, it is my pleasure to introduce President and COO of Butler Hospital, Mary Marin. Mary also serves as Care New England's leader for the Behavioral Health Service Line, as well as interim president and COO of the Providence Center. Along with Mary, you will be hearing from Dr. Kevin Bale, Medical Director of Outpatient Services and Chief of Addiction Services here at Butler Hospital, with John Sinnott, co-chair of this evening's event.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, all of our friends and long-term supporters, for tuning in tonight. Your collective efforts generously support our mission to deliver treatment for psychiatric illness and addiction in an atmosphere of dignity and respect. The community relies on Butler Hospital, and Butler Hospital relies on all of you to help us provide what our patients and families need and deserve. Continued unemployment, isolation, and childcare issues related to COVID-19 are having a significant effect on our community. People are feeling overwhelmed, anxious, depressed. Many are struggling with addiction and are struggling to maintain their recovery from addiction. That is why it is so important we have funding available to help provide compassionate care. And that is why we're here tonight.
Thank you, Mary. It's my pleasure to be here as we share with our viewers just how their philanthropy impacts the lives of those truly most vulnerable, those struggling with addiction. For those watching who are not familiar with Butler Hospital and the services we provide, can you tell us a little bit about the programs we offer?
Sure, Raina. Here at Butler, we provide services to adolescents, adults, and older adults in inpatient, partial hospital, and outpatient settings. Individuals come here to Butler for a variety of reasons, be it mood disorders, anxiety disorders, addiction. We have an inpatient geriatric service where we treat patients who are struggling from dementia. We have outpatient services for all who really need help with any and all of these conditions.
Butler Hospital is truly a resource for those with mental health and addiction issues. Can you tell us a little bit more about inpatient versus outpatient services?
Sure. Patients come here for inpatient care when they present a risk to themselves or to others. Typically, their length of stay is anywhere from 4 to 7 days. In our addictions unit, typically that's a shorter admission where the focus is primarily detox. From there, patients participate in care in our partial hospital setting where they attend for roughly 6 hours a day, receive group and individual treatment for their psychiatric or addiction disorders. We have intensive outpatient services where patients come 2 to 3 days a week for a few hours a day and receive group and individual therapy for mood disorders, anxiety disorders, addiction, as I mentioned before. And lastly, we have an expansive outpatient program where we treat patients typically on a weekly basis where they can see their physician or their therapist for continued management of their condition.
Mary, you mentioned addiction services, and that's what we're here raising funds for tonight. Now, I would like to bring in our other guests, Dr. Kevin Bale, Medical Director of Outpatient Services and Chief of Addiction Services at Butler Hospital, along with John Sinnott, co-chair of this year's event. John, thank you for being with us and for chairing the event tonight. I understand this is your 5th year.
Yes, thanks. It's my pleasure to serve as co-chair with Kelly Dorn. Kelly and I take our roles as community ambassadors for Butler very, very seriously.
John, how did you become involved with Butler Hospital?
Yes, the issues that Butler deals with, they address suicide, addiction, Alzheimer's, mental health issues. These affect every family across the state and across the country. And Butler's approach to help and assist them is tremendous. Being part of such a team of dedicated and passionate people is an honor. Over the years, we've continued to raise funds, critically needed funds for different programs, but this year is very, very meaningful because this year we're focused on addiction.
Dr. Bale is Chief of Addiction Services at Butler Hospital. Can you tell us more about the programs and wraparound supports we offer to those in crisis?
Yes, Raina, thank you. Our hallmark of our substance abuse service line is to treat patients with flexibility and with dignity. We have a variety of levels of intensity of care to meet a patient where they're at the particular moment in their struggle with addiction. We know that these problems tend to be long-standing and require ongoing care, but at different levels of intensity. And importantly, we work to establish a level of trust and use evidence-based measures to provide the best care possible, whether it's inside the hospital under 24-hour observation, or it's in our partial hospital 5 days a week in intensive therapy, or it's in our maintenance programs.
Now, if someone watching tonight has a friend or family member in need of addiction services, how can they help get them into our system of care?
Butler Hospital maintains a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week intake line. They can call anytime and receive a triage into the full menu of services that we have to offer. Access is a particularly important part of what we try to do here at Butler Hospital, so that when a person's ready to engage in treatment, that there's somebody at the other end of the line to respond.
Thank you so much. That's vital information because it's been such a stressful time for people, and it's important that they know how to reach out if they need support. Have you seen an increase in the number of patients struggling with addiction since the pandemic began?
We've definitely seen an increase in the needs of Rhode Islanders, whether it's mental health or substance abuse problems. I think we all can recognize that this is a very stressful time, and that a person that might have had a bad habit before March of 2020, that might be a little bit worse. And we've seen it in the numbers of people that are trying to access our call intake line. We've seen a steady demand for our detox services, and we have introduced virtual options for our partial hospital and IOPs to augment the in-person services, and we've seen a steady demand for those services as well.
And can you tell us what other changes you've seen at the hospital as a result of COVID-19?
There have been a lot of changes. One of our primary focuses from day one was to make sure that the hospital was a safe place for our staff and for our patients. And so we've introduced many protocols in line with CDC guidelines, including universal masking, testing at the front door, social distancing in all of our ambulatory spaces and inpatient spaces. Almost every one of our workflows has been impacted in some way by COVID-19. We put in tremendous efforts to really stand up our telehealth platform for patients so that they can receive needed services remotely. And we've got information that shows that that's equally effective for patients that are looking for that type of treatment. And it's very important that we have the capability to do that. So there was an enormous effort on the part of our clinical staff to jump into this space. We couldn't have done it without some generous support from the community. Butler Hospital from the beginning has relied on the support of the community, and that's definitely still the case to this day.
Well, it certainly sounds like treatment is evolving. There's clearly an addiction crisis.
There is a crisis. There is an addiction crisis. And an example of that, particularly in the construction industry where I come from. The construction industry is a dangerous industry, and people do get hurt to the point where 25% of the opioid deaths are from the construction industry. And it's a crisis, and it has impacted our workforces. The various organizations have really taken upon themselves to create training programs, getting the word out there, the education programs out there. Dr. Bale has been very helpful with that. So it's helping remove the stigma, but it's still out there, and there's still a lot of work that has to be done.
So thank you, Raina, Dr. Bale, and John for joining me in this important conversation. Now I'd like to introduce our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. James Sullivan. Jim is going to present our Corporation Member of the Year. This award is given to someone we recognize for many years of service to Butler Hospital, someone who supports our work and who introduces the hospital and its mission to friends and colleagues. And when Dr. Sullivan tells you a little bit about this year's recipient, I'm sure you'll agree he's most deserving of this recognition.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Jim Sullivan, Chief Medical Officer here at Butler Hospital. I want to add my thanks to you for taking the time to join us virtually this evening. Although we would have loved to have been with you in person, this is just one of the many adjustments that we've had to learn to make in this year of 2020. But it is likely that next year our time together will be all the more special. Many of you are familiar with Butler and have been longtime dedicated supporters. We are so grateful to you for all of your generosity. There are likely new friends viewing this program this evening, and I want to welcome you and provide you with some key information about Butler Hospital. We here at the hospital have celebrated 175 years of service. That's right. Butler opened its doors to patients on this very same campus in 1844. You have heard from Mary Marin, Dr. Kevin Bale, and John Sinnott about some of the programs that Butler offers. The clinical treatments here are so critical to those who are suffering from mental illness and addiction. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Butler provides valuable care to those in our community who are in need. Butler is a safety net, ensuring that those individuals in our community have access to mental health services. In addition, Butler offers support and resources to family members who often suffer along with their loved ones. Butler is here for our community, and our community responds back with their support, which comes in many forms. Tonight, we have received an outpouring of support from so many sponsors and guests. Your donations are key to helping us provide a wide spectrum of care to those in need. Thank you all. I'd especially like to thank our 2020 presenting sponsor, Hinckley Allen, for their outstanding generosity. It is noteworthy that we have numerous members of our community who give of their valuable time as volunteers to this important work. This kind of dedication to the hospital, to our staff, to our mission, and most of all, to our patients is remarkable. Thank you. Those who champion the cause for improved access to quality and equitable services for all individuals who suffer from mental illness and addiction know well that stigma should never be a barrier to that needed treatment. Through education and advocacy, the fight against judgment and stigma continues. We applaud those of you who stand up for our patients in this fight against stigma. Without you, their struggle would be that much greater. Thank you for all of your support. Tonight, I have the privilege to present the Butler Hospital Corporation Member of the Year Award. This award is given to a community member who we recognize for many years of service to Butler Hospital, someone who supports our work and who introduces the hospital and its mission to friends and colleagues. Without a doubt, our recipient this year is a true champion as he goes well beyond meeting these qualifications. Our honoree for the 2020 Butler Hospital Corporation Member of the Year is Charles Rapucci. Charlie, along with being the current chair of the Care New England Board of Directors, has provided decades of service to Butler Hospital. Although he needs no introduction to the C&E community, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure, I'd like to tell you a bit about Charlie. To say that Charlie is an ardent supporter of Butler is an understatement. Charlie joined the Butler Hospital Board of Trustees in 1982 and has been a champion of the hospital ever since. Over the span of 29 years, 1982 through 2011, Charlie has served as board treasurer, chair of the finance committee, as well as chairman of the board. Currently, we are fortunate to have Charlie serving as chair of the Care New England Board of Trustees. In addition, Charlie is a member of the C&E Board's Governance and Nominating Committee, Strategic Planning, Compensation, and Finance Committees. We congratulate Charlie on his recent retirement from his position as Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer of Hinckley Allen, where he has served for more than 25 years. In addition to his leadership at Care New England, Charlie has served on the board of a number of charitable and civic organizations. He's a true philanthropist, having served as the treasurer of the Legal Aid Society of Rhode Island and chair of both St. Thomas More Parish Council and the Quidnesset Country Club. A CPA by training, he earned a degree in accounting from the University of Rhode Island and a master's of business administration from Providence College. We are honored to be here this evening recognizing Charlie Rapucci. With me, celebrating this award, is Dr. Jim Finale, President and CEO of Care New England. Dr. Finale.
We at Care New England are proud to have Charlie's leadership and vision, particularly at this time. Charlie is the most outstanding of leaders, one who brings a strength and vision to the position, but who also has decades of history with the organizations within the system. His commitment to Butler and Care New England goes well beyond board meetings and fundraisers. He is an advocate, not only for those with mental illness who are served by Butler, for the entire health of our community. His vision is for a healthier and stronger future for Rhode Island and for healthcare organizations. Charlie never loses sight of the mission and is a remarkable person, a shining example of giving back to the community. For these and many other reasons, it is our honor and pleasure to present Charlie Rapucci as Butler's 2020 Corporation Member of the Year.
Thank you for recognizing my volunteer efforts and commitment to Butler Hospital over many years. If my memory's correct, I think my first year was in 1982. Interestingly, that year I was elected to the Butler board. My colleague, Steve Rasmussen, also joined Butler. Steve is a psychiatrist and me as a board member. I can proudly say that we continue today as proud members of the Butler community. I find as I get older, the younger generation enjoys hearing stories from the past, and I can recall a few to share with you today. It's not by accident that we have a beautiful and carefully planned and well-maintained campus here at Butler. In the 1980s, the board commissioned a land use study for the future use of the real estate. There were land allocations set aside for the hospital, for clinical and research offices, and other closely aligned services. An important aspect of the plan then became a reality with the development of the Laurel Mead campus. Today, this important development fits nicely into our campus, serving the needs of many residents. Another benefit as we planned it back then is that the annual leases are a source for our participation in the Brown University shared share. In the 1970s and 80s, some of you may remember Sam Abood. Sam, who was our executive chef, was a colorful fellow. Everyone looked forward to his menus and his special events. He and his family lived in the little house on the left as you come up the driveway. Back then, a nice thing was he would host a weekly breakfast in our dining room for all the local hospital CEOs for friendly conversation, good fellowship. It was always well attended. I have worked with 3 presidents during my Butler tenure. During my early years, the board elected Frank Delmonico, who was Butler's first non-physician president. Frank served for many years successfully, leading the hospital through many years of twists and turns in this healthcare environment. He retired years later with our best wishes and gratitude. If the name Delmonico is familiar to you, there is a building named after him. Frank guided the Butler board through many discussions regarding the merger of Women and Infants and Kent Hospital. That was Tom Paris from Women and Infants and John Hines from Kent. After the merger in 1996, John Hines became our first Care New England CEO and president. Those initial discussions occurred by happenstance. The gentleman and I were on the board of the Rhode Island Blood Center. I noticed that Tom and John would stay after the meetings for private conversations. After one meeting, I encouraged Frank to inquire what the two were discussing. Sometime later, the three-way talks began and ended with the three-way merger. Upon Frank's retirement, Dr. Patricia Recupero succeeded him and served after the merger and during the system's closer integration period. Pat was a terrific CEO who epitomized the best traits as a doctor, a businesswoman, and a friend to all. I was and am today very impressed with her dedication and compassion to serve our patients and grateful for her steadfast guidance to maintain Butler as a center of excellence. Today, as you know, we have a terrific president, Mary Marin. She has maintained both Frank and Pat's traits of strong and capable leadership, as well as being a steward of our longstanding recognition as a center of excellence. I could not forget all these people I mentioned, as well as many others, employed and volunteers working diligently to make Butler what it is today. Day in and day out through all these years, all these people made Butler Hospital, our patients, and our community a much better place. I accept this award today to honor all of them, and thank you.
Addiction is a formidable opponent, but it can be overcome. This is proven every day in our programs where addiction patients become addiction survivors. Every survival story is different, but at the root of them all, there is one common driving force: hope. Hope is why our patients fight every day for a better life. Hope is why our staff dedicates their lives to helping our patients on that path. And hope is why you, our donors, contribute to our programs and choose to extend a helping hand.
Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Dana, a young man and patient of Butler Hospital. He exemplifies the meaning of the word courage by sharing his story. Dana is an inspiring example of the life-changing impact that Butler Hospital can have on someone's future.
My dad was never in the picture. My dad was actually a heroin addict, so he was incarcerated a lot of my young life. And when he wasn't, the rule was he could always visit me as long as he was sober, but that never really happened. My mom ended up meeting someone who's my dad now. I call him Dad eventually, but she remarried, and he's a wonderful, great guy that really took care of me. You know, my mom always took care of me, and I had a pretty fairly normal life. And around when I was 10, my mom got a phone call, and I walked into her office, and she was crying, and she told me that my biological dad had died. So he passed away of an overdose. I didn't know it at the time. But the only thing I had to say was that it's okay, Mom, and I hugged her. I'd never even met anyone from my dad's side of the family because they're all so deeply in it. And it left a huge hole in my life, and I used to make up like fantasies in my head that my father was some great person, and one day, you know, I would meet him and everything would be, you know, like a fairy tale. It would just change everything. Because I missed him a lot. I didn't really understand he was gone sometimes. So we went and moved to New Hampshire, and I was about 13, and I started going to school up there. And life was really normal, and I was dead set against doing any drugs at all because of what my father went through, what my parents had taught me, what school and society teaches you through the DARE program. And I had all the toys in the world, dirt bikes and all sorts of stuff, and a loving mom, loving dad, a little brother. I had a class of 13 people. So a lot of attention, and you know, great long summers outside. You know, I started getting a little bit older, 13, 14, and we'd hang out down at a swimming hole and have fires and hang out down there. And one day there was, you know, someone took some liquor out of their parents' cabinet. And I tried that for the first time. Of course, that just seemed like a normal high school experience. Yeah. And it started right there. And I realized there was something that I was an awkward kid. it loosened me up. It made me feel normal and fit in, and this is cool. This is almost what like Hollywood society sells you to be a normal thing and like a cool thing, what a teenage year should be like. And it snowballed from there so incredibly fast. So I let that go. And then that was really good. That was fun. So let's try pot. And then that really took off for me. Everything in my life became about pot. I dove headfirst into it. I was a weird kid, and I was going to high school at that point, and I didn't understand why like the popular kids didn't like me, even though I was athletic and funny, and my parents made the same money that their parents did. So if they didn't like me in that sense, I wanted to make them need me, and I started selling pot. To support my habit, to fit in with people, to be invited to parties, to have any shot at like a girlfriend or anything like that, just to fit in. The thing about drugs is I feel they sell you some sort of false reality that everything's just gonna work out and something's gonna help you that doesn't exist, and your problems might just go away, and they don't. It just gets worse. Around this time I was 17, and I meet a girl, totally not my demographic of girl, but we click, and it's a crazy relationship that's fueled by more drug use, and it turns out that 3 months into it, she's pregnant with my kid. So I sit down with her parents, and we decide together that I'm gonna stop all this. I can work. I can do this. It's her choice, but I'll always support her and I'll always be there. And she wanted to have the child, so that's what I did. I stopped everything. I finished night school. I actually got certified as a machinist. Having a family to me was everything, because that's the one thing I had, but it wasn't the way. I never had mom and dad and the white picket fence and the tire swing, and that's what I wanted. And he ended up being born almost 6 weeks early, but he was perfectly healthy, 8 pounds, everything was, great, but slowly things just didn't work out between us. We were so young, there was so much stress, it just wasn't gonna work. So she left, and I started picking up my old ways and getting back into it, but this time, I kind of was mad about, losing my family. Again, it was like on the counter side of losing my dad. And I started to really sell. I came to Butler, I kept coming, and I kept coming again and again, just trying to detox. And I tried Suboxone, and like a magic switch went off, and Butler got me into the Sober House grant. So I'm still at a Sober House. I'm resident of the peer committee there. I run meetings. I work full time, no drugs, nothing at all. The first time, I have 4 months clean, but I feel good about myself, finally. I feel like rounded, the energy to get out of bed. I'm not heavily sedated. I'm not bouncing off the walls, and I feel like comfortable in my own skin for once. I'm not like lacking something. I'm not too much of something. I'm just where I need to be. And they were just really nice, and they listened to me, and we tried out meds, and I said, I've tried this one in the past, that doesn't work. They said, okay, let's try this then. And they played with it until I felt comfortable and ready to leave, and they didn't push me, they didn't do anything, they just gave me a safe place where I was comfortable. And I left here with like a plan and feeling prepared and ready to do it. And now I have a full-time job. I'm taking full responsibility and becoming the person I need to be. And I never would have been able to do it if there wasn't a place like this. It's impossible to get clean on your own.
Wow, thank you again, Dana, for sharing such a personal story of recovery. When struggling with addiction, guilt and shame don't drive change. Hope does. Every day at Butler Hospital, we deliver hope. Last year, 21,164 patients were diagnosed and treated at Butler Hospital, over 30,700 outpatient visits, and 20,500 partial hospital visits were provided by our compassionate staff to those in crisis. Now that's an impact.
With your help tonight, students, adults, and families in crisis can continue to receive mental health and addiction services to help them recover and stay well. You can help Butler Hospital continue to be at the forefront of addiction treatment for our community by aiding with urgent needs such as the continued implementation of telehealth services. Telehealth technology has been a vital part of addiction treatment during the pandemic. Lack of transportation and fear are significant barriers to receiving treatment. With your contribution right now, you will help to alleviate these barriers, significantly increase access to care, and help to purchase critically needed technology that will save lives and reduce the risk of relapse. To make a gift, you can call 401-921-8526 or send a text to 44321 and enter Masterpiece in the message box. And now, I would like to invite you to listen to our 2020 Lila Sappensley Community Service Award recipient, Catherine Cates-Wessel.
We're here on the beautiful Butler Hospital campus in Ray Hall for the second of our award presentations this evening.
We're so pleased to be with Butler Hospital President and COO, Mary Marin, and our 2020 recipient of the Lila Sappensley Community Service Award, Catherine Cates-Wessel. Congratulations, Catherine.
Thank you so much for this wonderful honor.
And thank you both for being here today.
It's my pleasure. It's actually our opportunity every year with the Lila Sappensley Award and the Corporator of the Year Award to recognize individuals who do work on behalf of our patients, both directly supporting the hospital or work that benefits our patients that happens really outside the walls of the hospital. So with these two awards, we're delighted to be able to recognize Catherine this year and Charlie Rapucci, who has been a longtime friend of Butler Hospital. So we're really excited that he's our Corporator of the Year as well this year.
Mary, tell us a little bit about the history of the Lila Sappensley Award.
Sure. Back in 2004, the Board of Directors of Butler Hospital at the time established this award in recognition of Lila Sappensley's 5 decades of service to the hospital. So Lila was the chairwoman of the Board of Directors in 1978 until 1984. But more importantly, she spent 5 decades supporting the hospital in a variety of ways. She was instrumental in establishing our affiliation with the medical school at Brown. Lila had a laser focus on teaching and research here at the hospital, so that was an important area to her. The other component of Lila is she was a trailblazer in Rhode Island. She was the first woman who had a leadership position, at the State House, and she spent her career both before and after supporting many nonprofits. Here at Butler, we were so fortunate that she put a lot of energy and attention to our hospital.
Lila was extraordinary and played such an important role in Butler's history.
She certainly was, and this award is our opportunity to recognize someone like Catherine, whose work really reflects a dedication to individuals who struggle with mental illness and addiction. So there's no one more appropriate to receive the award this year, so really delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
Catherine, from everyone here at Butler Hospital and all of Care New England, congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Catherine, can you tell us what brought you to be such a great advocate for people struggling with addiction?
I think where this all started was the way I was brought up. I was brought up in the South, and I was taught from my family to really speak up for those that couldn't speak for themselves. And then I got involved in medical education for training all physicians to be able to screen, diagnose, and treat people with addiction. And then from that, it took a long time for people to talk about mental health. Again, stigma is such a huge issue, and I think that the more and more you learn about it, the more the stigma is really what gets in the way. So I think that's been my motivation to really advocate for both illnesses, because so few people will. And so that's been my kind of interest and passion for being an advocate for others.
Catherine, that's truly inspiring. And I know coming here to Ray Hall is a bit of a homecoming for you. Can you tell me a little bit about your time here at Butler?
Coming to Butler is coming home for me. I was here for almost 18 years working in the Potter Center with Brown University Center for Alcohol and Addiction Studies, working alongside Dr. David Lewis, who's my mentor and like a second dad to me. So coming here and going to the cafeteria to see all the people and the people on the grounds. One of my best friends who I met here died while I was here. So it's a bittersweet because she was a big part of the center early on in the year. So for me, this was home for the longest time. So I do come back periodically. I live in the neighborhood, so we walk through, and my kids know this as part of coming home.
Catherine, tell us a little bit about the work you do now as the CEO for the American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry.
I'm very fortunate to work with some of the most compassionate and passionate addiction psychiatrists or clinicians in the country, as far as I'm concerned. It's the National Office for Psychiatrists who specialize in addictions. And a lot of people don't even know there is such a subspecialty in psychiatry. And our job really is to train and educate not only psychiatrists, but all health professionals. We have numerous federal grants. We don't take any pharmaceutical money. We vow to focus on evidence-based practices. And a lot of what we do is to try to cultivate new clinicians in the field, get medical students involved, really get rid of a lot of the barriers around training and education around substance abuse and mental health. While our organization is really, it's a membership organization, it's about training and education, providing evidence-based practices. Another thing that we're very committed to is not only training psychiatrists, but all health professionals. We have several national federal grants funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, where our major goal is providing free training, education, and mentorship at no cost to any of the health professionals. We provide training and education in every state and territory in the country. This past project we worked on 2 years, we touched over 3 million people in training and education. So a big part is really about taking what addiction psychiatrists who have been trained in this area, really to understand the co-occurring issues, and not just addiction and not just mental health, but really how they fit together and how you have to identify but also treat concurrently. So really trying to help share that information with all health professionals, not just doctors, but nurses, social workers, dentists, pharmacists. We work with all the major national professional organizations, and we work with the recovery community and the prevention community, because it goes across all. The spectrum is broad: prevention, treatment, and recovery, and how we can all come together to advocate, but also treat and care for our community.
Catherine, it's my privilege to present you with the 2020 Lila Sappingsley Community Service Award on behalf of Butler Hospital and the Butler Foundation Board. Your work is so important, and we are so honored to have you here this year receiving the award.
Thank you. So when I was told that I was getting the award, I was just humbled, because I really haven't done a lot in Rhode Island specific around these issues, much more nationally focused. But as I learned more about Lila's experience and her personality, it really was inspirational for me to try to do more locally. So what I want to emphasize this too is it's not just me. I have a huge group of people, specialists, staffers that really make up the team. I like to surround myself with a lot of people. So I'm really about coalition building and helping communities, whether they're local or nationally. And what I think is really important is that we all come together. I think it's extremely important for us all to stand tall and to speak out for mental health and for substance use disorders. There should be no shame in it. While there has been a lot of focus in the past, we really have to come together and speak loudly, because if not, we won't get the resources and the support that we need. But also, individuals won't feel that they're worthy if they're really sick. And I think it's really important for us as a society to stand up for people that sometimes can't speak for themselves.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to a true friend of Butler Hospital, co-owner of Sienna Restaurants, Anthony Taro. Time and time again, Anthony and his family have demonstrated their passion for our mission. Through their steadfast generosity to our Memory and Aging program, they have helped to fund world-leading research in the fight against Alzheimer's. So tonight, I invite you to sit back, relax, and learn about the differences the Taro family is making in people's lives while Anthony prepares scrumptious seasonal delights.
Welcome to our home, and I'm going to start off just by making what I would consider to be the most traditional style of bruschetta, which is really bread and tomato. About 5 years ago, I became involved in Butler Hospital through my father's Alzheimer's care. And although there was this phenomenal medical care that was given, my father succumbed to Alzheimer's-related injury that ultimately made him pass. But after that, my family and I, my brothers and sisters, became very involved in the process of trying to bring awareness to Alzheimer's research. And so we embarked on setting up the Robert Taro Memorial Fund to specifically benefit the Memory and Aging Unit at Butler Hospital. So myself and such a great group of people that are involved in the current committee really look at how we can raise as much money as possible for both Butler Hospital, this year for the addiction services at the hospital, and for all future fundraising activities. It's so important for us to get involved, and that's really why I decided to be a part of that. So this is really pretty simple. We're going to take some pre-grilled crostini. All I did with this was take a little bit of extra virgin olive oil and garlic, rub it in, take it out to my outside grill, and I grilled it. And this is something you can do advanced too. I think everybody's probably listened to the news and heard about all of the talk about how COVID-19, how being isolated is really creating a struggle for a lot of people. And I think because of that, there's been a greater dependency on drugs, alcohol, and other harmful substances. And so right now, I think it's so critical that every single person that hears this message today gets involved, becomes a donor to just help all of us to achieve a goal of finding some peace for the people that are afflicted with mental illness. For several years, my wife and I have been truly connected to the Butler Hospital Foundation. Myself serving on the committee, and obviously my wife and my family being a great part of supporting me. It's with great honor that I announce that my wife and I will act as the co-chair people for this event for 2021. And again, as much or as little as you like, take a little bit of fresh cracked black pepper on the top, a little extra sea salt, and a little bit more extra virgin olive oil. And that is what I consider to be traditional bruschetta.
Thank you, Anthony, and your entire family for believing in us. And a special thanks to all of you who have participated throughout tonight's program with your generous support. We are so grateful for the gifts we have received and those that are continuing to come in. You have helped countless youth and their families struggling with addiction in our community to receive the vital services they will need to recover and thrive. Thank you. There's still time to have life-saving impact. To make a gift, call 401-921-8526 to speak to one of our volunteers, or simply send a text to 44321 and enter Masterpiece in the message box. I would also like to remind you that we have an exciting online auction going on. After our program, we encourage you to visit butler2020.ggo.bid to see hot auction packages like a fully catered Thanksgiving dinner from Sienna or a curator-led private exhibition tour of the RISD Museum. Bidding ends tomorrow at noon, so it's not too late to purchase a holiday gift and at the same time, make a difference.
Wow, what a night. Thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Hinckley Allen, and all of you for joining us. We are so grateful for your support of Butler Hospital. Tonight's virtual celebration of hope and healing has been a tremendous success. Thank you again, and have a great night.